couple of people who might say, well, Makin saying this, that deflation's on the horizon, but if you look at some things like, for example, the price of gold, which people consider a classic hedge against inflation. It's not at record levels, but it's up pretty high. Or the futures on some commodities, for example, those are also higher. What's your response to that as something that weighs against your view that deflation is something that is right around the corner?
Right. Well, twofold. One, it does weigh against the deflation story. And personally, I haven't been able to bring myself to buy gold because I am worried about deflation. But I think in an environment where people are very uncertain about the future, their first concern tends to be, ooh, things are bad, they're going to do something crazy and we'll see more inflation. And so most people are advised to have a certain amount of gold in their portfolio as a hedge against the possibility that the remedy to deflation or disinflation will be inflation. So that risk is still out there and still perceived. One of the things that's happening in commodity markets, however, is to remember where is most of the growth in the world coming from, and it's coming from Asia, in particular China and India, where those two things are both pushing up the prices of raw materials to some extent, and gold is a preferred store of wealth in China and India. And so as that part of the world gets richer, more people in those areas want to buy gold and they push up the price. I would say another thing, if given all these factors, which are legitimate, the price of gold starts to go down, that's clearly an alarm bell that the deflation story is winning. And I would observe that, you know, gold peaked a few weeks ago at around $1,240 an ounce. It's now around $1,160. It could go back up. It's very volatile, but that's something I'm watching carefully, and we probably all should do.
Now, it sounds as if there isn't a ton of good historical experience to draw lessons from. You mentioned Japan. There's obviously the Great Depression. How quickly do we need to worry about going from deflation to then, say, rapid inflation or hyperinflation? This is an argument that you hear from inflation hawks who say, well, we've had tons of government spending and a very active, some might say hyperactive, Fed response to the crisis of 2008. So what I'm looking out at is an inflation scenario. How do you see that going from one to the other, or where do you sort of draw the line there?
Well, again, there's a tension there. I mean, to see U.S. 30-year bonds rally to below 4% in yield, which is a deflation or disinflation story, while gold goes up in price, you know, somebody's going to be wrong. So far, the disinflation story is winning out here, and so again, it's a matter of watching market behavior that tells you what people are thinking about where prices are going. As I say, if deflation becomes a problem, it will emerge gradually. The key as far as policy goes with deflation, and this is very difficult, deflation is sort of like a trap. If you get into it, it's hard to get out. And so when Chairman Bernanke or somebody else who's looked at historical experience with deflation writes about it, they say, well, you really have to step up to the plate and take proactive measures. If the Fed, let's say, waited until we actually had deflation, then it's harder to cure the problem because it's got a momentum of its own, and it means that people's expectations about where prices are going have shifted from inflation to deflation. And so the Fed has a bigger job to do to turn people around and say, no, we're not going to let this get out of hand. And already, actually, you know, what I find a little bit disconcerting is that, you know, over the past year and a half, the Fed has cut their interest rate to 0, and they've added $1.2 trillion to their balance sheet, and we've had a fiscal stimulus package worth $800 billion, and we're still seeing numbers where the inflation rate is dropping, and as we move into the second half of this year, we've just seen numbers that slow again. So we've hit the patient with a lot of drugs, and so far we haven't had dramatic success, which to me, again, going back to the original theme, means that it may be time to start thinking about proactive measures to prevent deflation.